Hi, my name is Kira Scruggs. This is a book study on unspeakable acts, unnatural practices, flaws and fallacies in the scientific reading instruction. The author is Frank Smith. This is for Dr. Williams's Reading 560 class at Concord University. I'm going to be kind of improvising because we did not have school today and everything that I was prepared for is at my school and we had no power. So I'm going to try and do everything from my computer. First, a little bit about the author, Frank Smith. He's always been fascinated by language and he enjoys taking a out-of-the-box approach to looking at language and language education and reading education and the processes within that. He has a PhD from Harvard University. He has been a professor at several universities, such as the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, the University of Toronto, the University of Victoria, British Columbia, and the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa. He lives on Vancouver Island when he's not traveling for research, giving lectures, or finding more information for his books. Most of his books are based on human thought and learning processes. The strategies that I would use to teach this book in a book study would be fishbowl or jigsaw or think, pay, or share, which all kind of resonate among each other, where the members of the whole group would be split into smaller groups. They would either be given or select a prompt or several prompts from the given materials. That's where the fishbowl comes in. Most of it would be put into a bag or a basket and you would just pick out, so it would be a random selection, or they can be teacher assigned. They would use those prompts post reading to evaluate their own thoughts and feelings about the text and then share out with the class, either whole group or start small by presenting with their group and then carrying on to presenting whole group. Some of the discussion prompts and questions that I came up with from various chapters throughout the book were as follows. From chapter 1, Smith states that the alphabet serves no purpose in reading, but it's more relevant to coding information on paper in a uniform manner. What he says here is pretty much that having an alphabet and having letters does not help you read. It only helps in categorizing and having a uniform manner of putting information on paper. There is no specific reason why DOG spells dog and not water. But having that uniform communication skills became essential, especially as he stated in the book, especially when mass production of printed materials became available, because after that, you couldn't just draw pictures, and being able to have a set, uniform, globally understood, or at least regionally understood method of communication was important for them being able to mass produce things that way. So that's where the alphabet came about. And alphabet really serves no purpose as far as reading because, as he states later on, being able to decode based on sound is ineffective, and that it is unreliable because of how many and how in-depth the sounds and letter collaborations are in the English language. The second question from chapter 3 was that what role does interest play in the understanding of skills and informations when it comes to reading? For students, if they are not interested in what they are learning or what they are reading or how information is being presented to them, they will have no care in the world about what is being given. They couldn't care less if, the water forms in the clouds and then falls and then evaporates and goes back. If it doesn't interest them, it goes in one side and out the other, and it is our job as educators to both provide information in a way that will interest them and that they will understand, as well as give them methods of obtaining information that relates to their life experiences, which is something that Smith really hits on. That reading is all about your experiences. We don't read because of letters on a page. We read because of how we relate information to life experiences and background knowledge. Excuse me. So having interest and taking stock in what you are learning greatly increases the possibility of you obtaining the information, as well as how well that information can be applied later on. Another question, or rather a statement from chapter 4, was that some researchers suggest that blended learning approach that encompasses the best of both worlds, but Smith seriously disagrees with this by saying that it would be similar to serving a poison diluted with an antidote. He uses references like this throughout the book because he is very anti-phonics. He is very anti-letter sound building blocks that many of us use in our classrooms. This is because goes back to the fact that he feels that reading should be based on your natural ability to take what you know from life itself and apply it to what you are seeing in a text, and being able to go from A to B and using those connections to pretty much teach yourself how to read. He does not believe that we should practice phonemic awareness. He does not believe we should practice phonics. He definitely does not believe in decoding at all, as he feels that these are kind of pretty much a waste of time. He feels that they're ineffective strategies, and that in a way teachers are hindering their students from being able to actually read, and that's where the unnatural practices part of our title comes in. He feels that we are taking away from the natural ability to formulate these abilities and trying to make it a scientific step 1, step 2, step 3 process, which it just doesn't work like that. It should be approached from a more natural aspect of learning. In chapter 4, he also says that in order for a child to read, the conditions must be set correctly, and the role is solely placed on the classroom teacher, as no one outside of the classroom is responsible for those conditions. This is something I personally agree and disagree with. I definitely agree with the first part, that the conditions must be correctly set in order for students to learn appropriately, for them to be ready to learn. Our hierarchy of needs says that if you are worried about where your next meal is going to come from, or if you are safe, you're not worried about learning 2 times 5, or you're not worried about learning what's the main idea of the text. You are more concerned with where is that meal coming from, and is someone going to hurt me. We do have a strong desire as well as duty to make sure that our students do feel safe and comfortable and their needs are being met within our classrooms. However, the part that I disagree with is that no one outside of the classroom is responsible for this. This would pertain much more to older learners, such as post-secondary education, because for a 6 or 7-year-old, they have no control over the environment they are in outside of school, and we can only do so much to meet those needs. When a 8-year-old comes to you and they just want to be held because they don't have any physical love and affection outside of the home, that does get carried into the classroom. So those are things that have to be handled before you can worry about teaching reading or teaching writing or teaching anything, really. If they don't feel that they are there mentally, they can't possibly be expected to learn. I do feel that parents should be held accountable. I mean, we have them, as teachers, we have them approximately 7 hours a day, and we are asked to cram so much into the 7.5 hour day. We're expected to include physical education, reading, writing, science, social studies, music. We are supposed to cram this entire child's education into 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And when they go home, they are just set in front of a TV or set in front of an iPad, and they are essentially forgotten about. And when some of those children get home, they don't receive any love, any care, anything from their parents other than there's usually a roof over their head. Parents should be held accountable for setting the mood and setting the expectations of what they expect from their children outside of school, and the mindset that children come into school with towards education. If they have a parent that says, oh, well, I was a bad student, reading doesn't matter anyway, or I was always better at math, so it's okay if you're not good at reading. Those mindsets and those ideas do not help children at all within the classroom. If anything, it gives them an excuse, and giving them that excuse to try to cop out of learning just makes the educator's job that much harder, which, let's be honest, no educator needs at this point in time. From chapter 5, I noted that, and I've mentioned it before in this video, he calls sounding out and decoding words using the phonemic methods a handicap, because just one of the factors he mentions is that there's over 300 ways that letters and sounds cooperate to form our language, and that when children strictly rely on being able to decode words by sounding them out, they are handicapped in their reading. I agree with this as a upper elementary teacher. I understand the purpose. I understand where the benefits lie in teaching children to decode. However, many students learn that they can decode words to find out what they mean or find out how to say them, but that does not teach them how to say it and teach them how to remember how to say it. If a student has to constantly stop and sound out a word, there is zero comprehension from whatever text is happening. And on top of that, relying on decoding scientifically proven, lasts up to about 4th grade. And once you get into domain-specific texts and informational texts that have unknown words, unknown meanings, being able to decode them is not going to help the child understand exactly what that word means. Approaching unfamiliar words initially with the idea that I can just sound it out and go on works for an extent, but once they reach those domain-specific texts, it no longer serves as a reliable method. They need to be able to effectively blend, segment, and all of those skills in order to be able to actually understand what they are reading. The comprehension level of children who have to stop and decode every other word drastically drops below those who can fluently gather context clues and decipher words using other methods without using decoding as a crutch to lean on. And I really feel like that's what he's hitting on when he calls it a handicap, is that children will use it as a crutch. And they think that once they learn that will hold true for the rest of their lives. And in some cases it may. But when you get into those higher order thinking questions, higher order thinking texts, that's not going to help, because it does not provide you with any comprehension whatsoever. And then one of the final discussion questions, which there could be hundreds of discussion questions for this text, was one that I feel like really affects us in the classroom now. And it was, how is technology referenced as a double-edged sword? He references it as a double-edged sword because technology should never be allowed or even attempted to take the place of a teacher. The teacher, himself, takes on the role of educator and also forms those bonds with the students takes interest in what their interests are, and learns those children inside and out to best know how to cater their education to them. And technology can't do that. Technology can't, talk about what they did over the weekend, or talk about why a book or a story made them happy or sad. And technology doesn't take into account the prior experiences that they've had in their life and how those experiences can affect their education and their feelings towards their education, or even just specific texts. Reading a book, reading Shiloh like we are in my 4th grade classroom, having that connection with the fact that the book is based in West Virginia, that alone is something that, if just listening to a book, that's not, having those discussions about how it relates to their lives is much different than if they were just handed the information and said, here you go, which is most of the time what technology does. It allows you to drill and practice, but it does not make that emotional or physical or mental connection between who they are as a person and who the educator is. It's great in some ways, but in others it really holds back from reaching complete capabilities. Okay, the last thing I would like to discuss is the graphic organizer that I would use to discuss this. I'm going to try and show it with the camera on my computer. This is a top-down topic web. At the top of the paper, let me see. Okay, at the top, you would put a main idea or your primary subject. In the 3 circles, you would place your 3 main highlights, followed by details below in the squares. This would just be an organizer for thoughts and details within the text, and this could be done for each chapter. This could be done for the book as a whole. It's really up to the educator's discretion as to how they would like to use this within their book study. In addition, this is a real eye-opener. It takes a much different look at education, and the biggest thing with this book is that not only does it have valid points, but it makes you think about the not so pretty side of what we do. And it makes you really wonder if all of these things that we're being told to teach this way, teach that way, it makes you wonder if some of the things that we're being told to do are really as effective as they are. And after reading this book, it makes you think of your processes and your teaching methods more critically than you may have before. I know I'm looking at it more critically, especially in my reading education. But it's pretty interesting. It's not a long book. It's easy. It's an easy read. And as long as you approach it with an open mind, that Frank Smith, our author, does take a very out-of-the-box, critical analysis point of view in evaluating it. And he makes his views very clear, and they may not come across as politically correct or polite, but it is how he views these factors of education. One thing I would say is that many of the things he says, I personally feel are geared toward much older students. I do not feel that a lot of his ideas are geared toward elementary students, or especially young elementary students, because there are some necessities that you cannot live without that he does condemn a little bit in the text. But it is a good read. It is something that makes you think critically about your own practices in your classroom. And like I said, so this is Unspeakable Acts and Unnatural Practices, Flaws and Fallacies of Scientific Reading Instruction by Frank Smith. This has been my book review / book study for Concord University's Reading 560, Dr. William Williams' class. Have a great day.